frozen, injured. Grizzly bear begs police officer for shelter. What happens next will shock you. If you like our content, don't forget to like and subscribe. The wind howled through the snow-covered streets of Pine Haven, a small town nestled against the wilderness of Montana. Officer Thaddeus "Thad" Winters sat alone at his desk in the quiet police station, his coffee growing cold as he sorted through the night's paperwork. The old building creaked and groaned under the weight of fresh snow, but Thad barely noticed. After 15 years on the night shift, these sounds had become as familiar as his own breathing. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight when everything changed. A heavy thud against the station's front window made Thad jump, sending his coffee cup teetering dangerously close to the edge of his desk. His first thought was that someone had thrown something. It wouldn't be the first time local teenagers had caused mischief during the quiet hours, but when he looked up, his heart nearly stopped. There, pressed against the frosted glass, was the massive form of a grizzly bear. Its breath fogged the window in rapid, shallow bursts, and even through the glass, Thad could see the desperation in its eyes. This wasn't the fierce, threatening gaze he'd been trained to watch for during wildlife encounters. These eyes held something he'd never seen in a wild animal before. A plea for help. Blood matted the bear's thick fur, forming dark icicles where it had frozen in the bitter cold. As Thad slowly stood from his desk, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon, the bear did something that made him question everything he knew about these powerful creatures. It lifted one massive paw and pressed it against the glass, not in aggression, but with an almost human-like gentleness. Then it slumped against the window, leaving a smear of red against the frost-covered surface. Thad's radio crackled at his hip, and his fingers trembled as he reached for it. Protocol said to call Wildlife Services immediately. Protocol said to secure the building and wait for backup. Protocol had never accounted for a bear that looked at you with eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world. Thad's hands shook as he pressed the radio button, but something made him pause. 20 years of police work had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now, every fiber of his being told him this was different. He thought of his daughter Marina's voice, always telling him he had a gift for reading souls, even if she was teasing him about being too soft-hearted for a cop. The bear's eyes haunted him, filled with an intelligence and pain that seemed almost human. The creature stumbled against the window again, leaving another crimson streak. Its massive body trembled violently, and Thad could see now that patches of its fur were singed, giving off a faint, acrid smell that seeped through the building's old walls. The bear's breaths came in ragged gasps, creating expanding and contracting circles of fog on the glass. Each exhale seemed weaker than the last. Sergeant Rosalie Chen's voice crackled over the radio, making him jump. "Base to Winters. Everything quiet out there?" The bear's head lifted at the sound, but instead of showing aggression, it seemed to sink further into itself, as if the last reserves of its strength were fading. Thad watched as it tried to maintain its footing in the deepening snow, its massive paws sliding uselessly against the ice. "Thad, do you copy?" Rosalie's voice came again, more insistent this way. He could picture her face, lined with the wisdom of 30 years on the force, and wondered what she would do in this situation. The protocol was clear. Call Wildlife Services, secure the building, wait for backup. But Wildlife Services was 3 hours away in this weather, and looking at the bear's deteriorating condition, Thad knew it didn't have 3 hours. The wind picked up, howling through the trees that surrounded the small station. The sound carried something else with it, a distant roar that made the bear's head snap up, its eyes now wide with what Thad could only describe as terror. That's when he noticed something even more unsettling. The bear's fur wasn't just singed, there were patterns to the burns, almost like it had run through a wall of fire. And that roar, it sounded like the hungry voice of a forest fire. Thad's mind raced back to the emergency alert he'd dismissed earlier that evening. Something about unexpected fire activity in the North Woods, despite the snow. It hadn't made sense at the time. Forest fires in this weather seemed impossible. But as he looked at the bear's injuries again, a horrible realization began to dawn on him. "Winters, if you don't respond in the next 10 seconds, I'm sending backup." Rosalie's voice cut through his thoughts. The bear's eyes met his again, and in that moment, Thad made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He lifted the radio to his lips, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Base, this is Winters. We have a situation." Thad kept his eyes locked on the bear as he spoke. "I need you to contact Dr. Eleanor Swift at the Wildlife Sanctuary. Tell her it's an emergency." Dr. Swift had helped them before with injured wildlife, though never anything quite like this. She was known throughout Pine Haven for her almost miraculous ability to heal animals others had given up on. "A situation?" Rosalie's voice carried a note of concern he'd rarely heard in all their years working together. "Thad, what aren't you telling me?" The bear swayed dangerously, its massive body trembling more violently now. Without thinking, Thad pressed his hand against the glass where the bear's paw had left its mark. The window felt like ice against his skin, and he could only imagine how the cold must be affecting the injured creature. The bear's eyes clouded with pain, fixed on his hand, and something passed between them, an understanding that transcended the natural barriers between species. "Rosalie," Thad said softly into the radio, "remember that time we found those orphaned wolf pups? Remember how you said, sometimes we have to trust our hearts over our training?" He heard her sharp intake of breath, knowing she'd understand exactly what he was suggesting. The wolf pup incident had nearly cost them both their badges, but it had also saved 3 lives and become something of a legend in the department. "Thaddeus James Winters," Rosalie's voice carried both warning and worry, "please tell me you're not about to do something monumentally stupid." A pause, then softer. "At least tell me you're not alone." The irony of her words wasn't lost on him as he watched another vehicle pull into the station's parking lot. Through the swirling snow, he recognized Detective Marcus "Mac" Rodriguez's old Bronco. Mac had probably come to drop off paperwork from the county courthouse, his usual Thursday night routine. The timing couldn't have been worse, or perhaps, Thad thought with a sudden flash of hope, it couldn't have been better. The bear turned its head toward the sound of Mac's car door slamming, and for the first time, Thad saw the full extent of its injuries in profile. The right side of its face showed evidence of severe burns, the fur completely gone in patches, revealing raw, frozen skin underneath. But it was the bear's eyes that truly told the story. They held not just pain, but a depth of loss that made Thad's chest tighten. He'd seen that look before in the mirror, after losing his wife Sarah to cancer 3 years ago. It was the look of someone who had lost everything and was running on nothing but desperate hope. Mac's boots crunched in the snow as he approached the station's entrance, his head down against the wind. He hadn't noticed the bear yet. Thad had seconds to make a decision that could end his career, or worse, end his life. But as he looked at the bear again, watching as it struggled to remain standing, he knew there was really no decision to make at all. "Actually, Rosalie," he said into the radio, his voice taking on the calm certainty he usually reserved for crisis negotiations, "backup just arrived. And you're right, I am about to do something monumentally stupid, but I'm also about to do something right." He set the radio down before she could respond, already moving toward the station's entrance. The bear watched him, its eyes following his movement with an intelligence that both unnerved and reassured him. Just as Mac reached for the door handle, Thad yanked it open, pulling his startled colleague inside. Mac's hand instinctively went to his weapon, but Thad gripped his arm. "Before you do anything," Thad said quickly, "I need you to trust me. And I need you to really look at what's outside that window." Mac's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief as he turned toward the window. The bear had slumped further down, its massive body now barely supporting itself against the glass. The snow around its paws had turned a pale pink, and its labored breathing left expanding and contracting patches of fog on the window. "Holy Mother of—" Mac whispered, unconsciously taking a step backward. "Thad, I know what it is," Thad cut him off, keeping his voice low and steady, "but I need you to see what I'm seeing. Look at its eyes, Mac. Really look." The bear's gaze had followed them inside, tracking their movements with an awareness that seemed to transcend its wild nature. As if understanding it was being discussed, the creature lifted its head slightly, and Mac drew in a sharp breath. "I've never—" Mac trailed off, his hand falling away from his weapon. In his 23 years of service, including 5 years in Alaska, he'd encountered his share of bears. But this was different. The intelligence in those eyes, the almost human-like plea they contained, defied everything he knew about these animals. "The burns," he said slowly, his detective's mind already working. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Before Thad could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from his daughter Marina lit up the screen. "Dad, are you seeing this? The fire jumped the ridge. It's doing something weird, moving through the snow like it's nothing. Grandpa says he's never seen anything like it." Attached was a video showing an otherworldly scene, flames dancing across snow-covered ground, defying all logic as they consumed everything in their path. The bear made a sound then, not a growl or a roar, but something closer to a whimper. It was a sound that spoke of loss, of terror, of desperate flight. Both men watched as it tried to stand straighter, its muscles trembling with the effort. In the station's harsh fluorescent lights, they could now see that its burns followed a pattern, more severe on one side, as if it had repeatedly exposed the same part of its body to the flames. "It was trying to save something," Mac said quietly, his voice thick with sudden understanding. "Or someone." He'd seen similar burn patterns in human rescue attempts, when someone kept running back into danger to save others. The realization hung heavy in the air between them. The radio crackled again, making them both jump. "Winters Rodriguez, this is Chen. Dr. Swift is en route, ETA 40 minutes, and—" There was a pause, filled only by static and the howling wind. "Fire service just reported the Northridge fire is showing unprecedented behavior. It's jumping fire breaks, moving against the wind. They're calling for immediate evacuation of all forest-adjacent properties." Another pause. "Whatever you're planning, you've got incoming." The night shift guys, Cooper, Martinez, and Yang, they heard the call. "They're heading your way." Thad and Mac exchanged glances. Officer Sarah Cooper had been raised on a wildlife sanctuary. Officer Miguel Martinez had experience with large animal rescue from his days working with the Park Service, and Officer Lucy Yang had done a rotation with the Veterinary Emergency Response Team. If you were going to attempt something impossible with an injured grizzly bear, you couldn't ask for a better team. The bear suddenly lurched away from the window, its massive body swaying dangerously. For a moment, both men thought it was going to collapse. Instead, it turned its head toward the north, where an orange glow had begun to taint the snow-filled sky. The sound that came from it then would haunt them both forever, a low, mournful call that seemed to carry all the grief in the world. "We can't wait 40 minutes, Thad said, already moving toward the emergency medical cabinet where they kept the tranquilizer kit. It was meant for aggressive dogs, not bears, but it might help take the edge off the pain. Whatever happened to this bear, whatever it lost out there, it came to us for help. And I don't know about you, Mac, but I'm not about to let it die in the snow while we wait for proper protocol." Mac watched as the bear pressed its forehead against the glass, its breath coming in shorter gasps now. The gesture was so human, so full of despair, that he felt something shift in his worldview. 23 years of training told him this was dangerous, reckless, career-ending madness. But sometimes, he realized, the most important moments in life came down to choosing between what was safe and what was right. "Get the emergency blankets from the supply closet," Mac said, already shrugging off his thick winter coat. "And grab those heating packs we use for hypothermia cases." He pulled out his phone, fingers flying over the screen. "I'm texting Martinez to bring the portable heater from his truck. Yang always carries a full med kit, and Cooper—" He paused, a slight smile crossing his face. "Cooper's grandmother was the vet at Yellowstone for 30 years. Girl probably knows more about bears than most wildlife experts." Thad moved quickly, gathering supplies while keeping one eye on the bear. Its breathing had become more labored, and ice crystals had formed around its nostrils. The orange glow in the northern sky had intensified, and now they could hear it, a distant roar that had nothing to do with wildlife and everything to do with an inferno that defied the natural order. The bear's head suddenly snapped up, its ears swiveling toward the sound. A tremor ran through its massive body, and for the first time, they saw something that made their blood run cold. Clutched in the fur near its chest, frozen and partially hidden, was a scrap of something dark and matted. It looked terrifyingly like the fur of a smaller bear. "Oh God," Mac whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "It's a mother and that fire." He couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. They both understood now why this bear's eyes held such human-like grief, why it had risked everything to seek help from what should have been its natural enemies. The station's back door burst open, bringing a swirl of snow and 3 figures in heavy winter gear. Officer Lucy Yang entered first, her med kit already open as she assessed the situation. Sarah Cooper was right behind her, moving with the calm confidence of someone who had grown up around dangerous animals. Miguel Martinez brought up the rear, lugging a portable heater and what looked like half the emergency supplies from his truck. "Holy she," Yang started, but Cooper cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Everyone, quiet," Sarah said softly, her eyes fixed on the bear. "No sudden movements. No loud noises." She took in the scene with practiced efficiency, noting the blood, the burns, the labored breathing. "This is about as bad as it gets, folks. That fire's moving like something out of a nightmare, and this mama—" Her voice caught slightly. "She's got severe burns, probably smoke inhalation, and definitely hypothermia. But that's not what's killing her." "It's her cub, isn't it?" Thad asked quietly, though he already knew the answer. "She lost it in the fire." Sarah nodded, her expression grim. "Bears are smart. A lot smarter than most people realize. And grizzly mothers." She paused, swallowing hard. "The bond with their cubs is incredibly strong. Some mothers who lose their cubs have been known to call for them for days, even weeks. This one, ... She gestured to the desperate creature at their window. She must have tried everything to save her baby. When that failed, something in her knew this was her last chance. The bear made that haunting sound again, a low moan that seemed to carry all the grief of the world. Its legs finally buckled, and it slid further down the window, leaving a long streak of red and water on the glass. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying with it the acrid smell of unnatural fire, and, underneath it, something else. A high, keening sound that made the hair on the back of their necks stand up. "That's a death keen," Sarah whispered, her professional detachment cracking. Some really old-timers in Yellowstone used to swear they'd heard bears mourn their dead this way, but it was always dismissed as folklore. I never thought... She straightened suddenly, her voice taking on a tone of command. "We've got about 10 minutes before she's too far gone. Whatever we're going to do, it has to be now." Thad moved toward the door with slow, deliberate steps, remembering everything he'd learned about animal behavior during his years on the force. But as he reached for the handle, Sarah's grandmother's response came through on her phone, and her sharp intake of breath made everyone freeze. "Gran says there's an old story," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. "Something the indigenous peoples of this region used to talk about. A fire that hunts. A fire that thinks. They called it the spirit fire, and it was said to appear in times of great environmental distress, targeting the strongest and most influential creatures in the forest first." She looked up from her phone, face pale. "The stories say it specifically went after mother bears, the guardians of the wilderness." The bear seemed to understand every word. Her eyes, glazed with pain, but still intensely alert, fixed on Sarah as she spoke. Another explosion rocked the forest, closer this time, and the temperature around the station began to rise despite the falling snow. The bear pressed herself against the window with renewed urgency, leaving bloody smears on the glass. "Martinez," Mac barked. "Status on that warm zone?" "Ready," Miguel replied, the portable heater humming steadily. He'd also laid out emergency blankets in a careful arrangement, creating a path from the door to a protected corner. Years of large animal rescue experience showed in every precise detail. "I've got the honey here too, and some protein bars from my truck. Bears can smell them a mile away, and this one looks like she needs the calories." Lucy Yang knelt beside her expanded medical kit, double-checking supplies. "I've got the mild sedative ready, plus burn treatment supplies, antibiotics, and enough gauze to wrap a moose." She'd added several chemical ice packs to help manage the bear's temperature. "Cooper, that research you mentioned about bear body temperature, what's our target range?" Before Sarah could answer, the bear made a sound that silenced everyone. It wasn't a keen or a warning this time. It was something eerily close to speech, a series of huffs and low vocalizations that seemed to carry desperate meaning. She pressed the scrap of her cub's fur against the glass one more time, then used her muzzle to deliberately push it through a small gap where the old window frame had warped away from the sill. The tiny piece of fur fluttered to the floor inside the station. The message was unmistakable. "She's giving us her most precious possession," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "The last piece of her cub she has, She had to stop, overcome with emotion. In bear culture, if you can call it that, cubs are everything. A mother bear would die 1,000 times over before abandoning any trace of her cub. For her to give this to us, she's not just asking for help. She's placing her complete trust in us." The bear's legs buckled again, and this time she couldn't catch herself. She slid halfway down the window, leaving a broader smear of blood and melting ice. Her breathing had become shallow and rapid, a dangerous sign. Through the windows, they could see the fire approaching, moving like a living thing through the trees. It seemed to pause occasionally, as if tasting the air, before surging forward with renewed purpose. Thad's phone buzzed one final time. Marina's message was brief but terrifying. "Dad, the fire just changed direction. It's heading straight for the station. Please tell me you're somewhere safe." The bear's eyes met Thad's again, and in that moment he understood something that would change his view of the world forever. This wasn't just about saving an injured animal. This was about standing witness to something profound. A moment when the natural world reached out to humanity not in fear or aggression, but in desperate trust and shared understanding. "Yang, prep that sedative," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "Martinez, stand ready with the blankets. Cooper, you'll guide us through every step." He looked at Mac, his oldest friend and colleague. "And Mac, if this goes wrong, I want it on record that everyone here acted under my direct orders." Mac stepped forward, placing a hand on Thad's shoulder. "To hell with the record," he said quietly. "Some things are more important than protocols and procedures. One look in that bear's eyes and anyone can see we're not just dealing with an animal. We're dealing with a mother who lost her child to something evil, something that's still hunting her. And if we don't help her now, we're not worthy of wearing these badges." The fire roared closer, and the heat began to warp the windows. The bear gathered her last reserves of strength and lifted her head one final time. In her eyes, they saw not just pain and loss, but something that looked remarkably like hope. Outside, the spirit fire danced through the snow-covered trees, consuming everything in its path as it approached the station. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before it reached them. Thad wrapped his hand around the door handle, every instinct screaming at him to reconsider what they were about to do. But sometimes, he realized, the most important moments in life come when we choose to ignore our instincts and listen to our hearts instead. The moment Thad began to turn the handle, Sarah's phone lit up again. Her grandmother had sent another message, this one even more urgent than the last. "The elders say the spirit fire doesn't just hunt, it tests," Sarah read aloud, her voice shaking. "It seeks out moments of connection between the natural world and humanity. Some stories say it's not truly malevolent, but rather a force of change, pushing us toward understanding we're not ready to accept." Through the windows they could see the fire's approach changing. Instead of the straight destructive path it had been taking, it now moved in intricate patterns, creating circles of flame that seemed to dance through the snow. The heat had become intense enough to make the windows creak, but strangely, the snow directly around the station remained unmelted, as if some force was protecting their immediate vicinity. The bear's breathing had grown so shallow it was barely visible, but her eyes remained locked on Thad's hand on the door handle. Lucy Yang moved closer, medical supplies ready. "Her vital signs are crashing," she said, professional calm warring with emotion in her voice. "Core temperature's probably dangerously low, and those burns—" She swallowed hard. "If we don't act now, we'll lose her." Miguel Martinez had been quietly working while the others talked, his experience with large animal rescue guiding his preparations. He'd created a pathway of blankets leading to a corner he'd transformed into a makeshift medical station. The portable heater hummed steadily, and he'd arranged protein bars and honey in a careful trail. "In my years with the Parks Service," he said softly, "I learned that animals can sense intention. Right now, she knows we want to help. That's why she's still here, still fighting to stay conscious." A memory suddenly struck Thad, something his late wife Sarah had told him years ago, when she was working on her doctoral thesis in animal cognition. "Bears have episodic memory," he said, the words coming back to him. "They can remember specific events, emotions, experiences. They're one of the few animals that can recognize kindness and remember it years later." Mac nodded, understanding dawning on his face. "So, everything we do in the next few minutes." "She'll remember," Sarah confirmed. "Not just as instinct or conditioning, but as a real memory, complete with emotional context. Bears have been known to recognize humans who helped them years earlier. Some researchers think their emotional memory might be even more sophisticated than we imagined." The bear made another sound then, somehow both a plea and a warning. Her eyes darted toward the approaching fire, then back to the humans. The message was clear. Time was running out. The spirit fire had reached the edge of the station's parking lot, its flames taking on shapes that seemed almost like reaching hands. Lucy stepped forward, sedative ready. "I've adjusted the dose based on her estimated weight and condition. It's enough to dull the pain and keep her calm, but not enough to knock her out completely. She needs to stay conscious enough to work with us." Her hands were steady, but her voice betrayed her emotion. "I've never seen burns like these. It's like the fire was playing with her, causing maximum pain without killing her." Sarah's phone buzzed one final time. Her grandmother's message was brief but profound. "The old stories say that when the spirit fire tests us, it's not just testing our courage or compassion. It's testing our ability to see beyond the boundaries we've created between human and animal, between civilization and wilderness. The outcome of these moments ripples through generations." The bear suddenly lifted her head, every movement clearly causing intense pain. She pressed her nose against the glass one last time, leaving a perfect print next to her paw mark. Then she did something that defied everything they knew about wild animals. She deliberately lowered herself into a submissive posture, exposing her vulnerable neck and belly against the window, a position no wild bear would ever willingly take. "She's not just asking for help anymore," Sarah whispered, tears flowing freely now. "She's surrendering herself completely to our care. In bear body language, this is—" She had to stop, overcome with emotion. "This is absolute trust, the kind of trust a cub shows its mother." The spirit fire surged forward suddenly, its flames taking on the unmistakable shape of a massive bear made of fire. It reared up behind their injured visitor, its burning eyes fixed on the humans inside the station. The heat became almost unbearable, but still, impossibly, the snow immediately around the station and the injured bear remained unmelted. Thad felt the door handle growing hot under his palm. They had seconds, maybe less, before the supernatural fire reached them. But as he looked at the injured mother bear, seeing the trust and hope in her eyes, he understood that this moment was about more than saving one animal. It was about bridging a gap that had existed since humans first drew lines between themselves and the natural world. "Everyone ready," he said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. "Yang, prepare for immediate medical intervention. Martinez, be ready with those blankets. Cooper, you guide us through every movement." He looked at Mac, seeing in his old friend's eyes the same determination he felt. "And Mac, document everything. The world needs to know what happened here tonight." The bear's eyes never left them as Thad began to open the door, the metal hot enough now to burn his palm through his sleeve. Outside, the spirit fire seemed to pause, as if watching, waiting to see what choice they would make. In that moment, suspended between terror and transcendence, they all understood that they were part of something ancient and profound. A test not just of their courage, but of humanity's capacity to see beyond its self-imposed boundaries. The moment Thad pulled the door open, several things happened simultaneously. The temperature in the station dropped dramatically, creating a sudden fog as warm and cold air collided. The spirit fire's bear-shaped form seemed to rear up, its fiery outline growing more distinct against the night sky. And most remarkably, the injured mother bear, summoning strength they wouldn't have believed she still possessed, pulled herself to her feet with terrible determination. "Move slowly," Sarah instructed, her voice barely above a whisper. Bears have poor eyesight but exceptional hearing and smell. Let her process every movement. She glanced at her phone one last time, where her grandmother had sent a final message. The old stories say that in moments like these, when the spirit fire brings human and animal together, a bond can form that transcends ordinary understanding. The bear may share memories, emotions, even knowledge that would otherwise be impossible to convey. Lucy Yang had positioned herself carefully, the sedative hidden behind her back to avoid alarming their visitor. Her breathing pattern has changed, she observed. Medical training warring with awe in her voice. It's more deliberate now, like she's trying to control her pain. I've never seen an animal demonstrate this level of conscious pain management. The bear took one halting step toward the open door, then another. Blood dripped from her wounds, instantly freezing on the snow-covered ground. But her eyes remained clear and focused, moving from one human face to another as if memorizing them. When she reached the threshold, she paused, swaying slightly. "Look at her fur," Miguel said suddenly, his voice tight with emotion. "The burn patterns, they're not random." Now that they could see her clearly, they understood what he meant. The burns formed distinct patterns, almost like writing, across her shoulders and flanks. Some areas were barely singed, while others showed deep tissue damage, creating what looked disturbingly like deliberate markings. The spirit fire wasn't just chasing her, Sarah breathed, recognition dawning in her eyes. It was marking her. Grandmother's stories mentioned this. Creatures that survived encounters with the spirit fire were sometimes left with markings that carried meaning, messages for those who knew how to read them. The bear's legs trembled violently, and for a moment they thought she would collapse. Instead, she did something that would be discussed in scientific circles for years to come. She turned slightly, exposing her most severely burned side, and deliberately pressed her paw against her chest where the cub's fur had been. A sound emerged from her throat. Not a growl or a moan, but a series of carefully modulated vocalizations that seemed almost like speech. "She's trying to tell us something," Sarah said, her scientific training battling with what her instincts were telling her. Bears have over 15 different vocalizations we've documented, but this is something else entirely. Thad felt a strange sensation, like a pressure in his mind. Images began to flash through his consciousness. A warm den, the sound of tiny cubs nursing, a sense of profound peace and contentment. Then terror, as the spirit fire approached. The desperate attempt to save her cubs, running back into the flames again and again. The unspeakable grief as she lost them one by one, until only a single cub remained. The final, terrible moment when the spirit fire seemed to speak to her, offering a choice, her life or her last cubs. "Oh my God," he gasped, staggering slightly. "I can see, I can feel." The others steadied him, their faces showing similar expressions of shock and wonder. They were all experiencing it. The bear was somehow sharing her memories, her emotions, her devastating loss. The spirit fire's bear-shaped form took another step closer, its fiery paws leaving no marks in the snow. The heat should have been unbearable, but instead they felt only a strange tingling sensation, as if reality itself was being altered around them. The injured mother bear turned to look at it, and in that moment they all understood something profound. This wasn't just about saving one bear's life. This was a moment of choosing, of proving whether humanity could rise above its fears and prejudices to recognize the consciousness and worth of other beings. Mac's police body cam was running, capturing everything. No one would believe this without proof, he said softly, though they all knew that no camera could truly capture the depth of what was happening. The bears' memories continued to flow into their minds, not just images and sensations, but complex emotions and ideas that challenged everything they thought they knew about animal consciousness. Lucy stepped forward slowly, the sedative ready. Her temperature's dropping dangerously, she warned, professional concern momentarily overriding her awe. If we're going to help her, it has to be now. She looked at Sarah for guidance. But how do we, with everything that's happening? The bear made the decision for them. With deliberate care, she lowered herself to the ground just inside the doorway, once again exposing her vulnerable throat in a display of trust that defied every natural instinct. Her eyes met Thad's one more time, and the flow of memories shifted, showing him something new. A vision of healing, of recovery, of a future where the boundary between human and animal understanding had been forever changed. The spirit fire's ursine form seemed to nod, as if satisfied, and then began to fade. As it disappeared, the bear's markings began to glow with a faint, ethereal light. Sarah's phone buzzed one final time with her grandmother's message. The markings are a gift, a responsibility. They mark her as a bridge between worlds. How you care for her now will determine more than just her fate. It will shape the future of human-animal understanding for generations to come. Lucy moved forward with practiced efficiency, though her hands trembled slightly as she administered the sedative. The bear's eyes remained fixed on Thad, continuing to share memories and emotions even as the medication began to take effect. The images were becoming more focused now, more specific, showing them something they needed to understand. "There's more to the spirit fire than we thought," Sarah said suddenly, interpreting the flow of images. "She's showing us. It's not just testing us, it's preparing us for something." The bear's memories shifted, revealing glimpses of other marked animals in the forest. Wolves with silvery patterns in their fur, elk with strange symbols etched in their antlers, even birds whose feathers bore impossible, shimmering designs. Miguel and Mac worked together to carefully wrap the bear in thermal blankets, their movements guided by the strange understanding they now shared with her. "Her temperature's stabilizing," Lucy reported, monitoring vital signs with multiple devices. "But these burns, they're like nothing I've ever seen. They're not just surface damage. They seem to be changing, evolving, even as we watch." The markings on the bear's fur had indeed begun to shift, the patterns becoming more distinct as they glowed with the soft, pulsing light. Sarah's grandmother was continuously sending messages now, translating ancient stories that seemed to predict this very moment. "The marks tell a story," Sarah read aloud, her voice filled with wonder. "They speak of a time when the barrier between human and animal understanding would begin to fall, starting with a mother's sacrifice and a choice made in the darkness." Thad felt the bear's consciousness brush against his mind again, stronger now despite the sedative. She was showing him something urgent, a vision of the forest from high above, where dozens of spirit fires moved through the wilderness like searching fingers. Each one seemed to be seeking specific animals, marking them with similar patterns, creating a network of enlightened creatures across the landscape. "It's not just her," he said, understanding dawning. "This is happening everywhere in these woods. The spirit fire is changing things, creating bridges." He looked at the bear's burns with new understanding. These aren't just marks of survival. They're a kind of language, a way for marked animals to share their consciousness with humans who are ready to understand. Dr. Eleanor Swift finally arrived, bursting through the door with her medical kit and stopping short at the scene before her. Her decades of veterinary experience hadn't prepared her for what she saw: a critically injured bear calmly allowing treatment while sharing psychic visions with the humans around her. "I've never," she began, then steadied herself. "Tell me everything quickly." As Lucy and Sarah briefed Dr. Swift on the bear's condition and the extraordinary circumstances, Miguel noticed something remarkable. The protein bars and honey he'd laid out as lures remained untouched, but small objects from around the station had begun to move on their own, arranging themselves in patterns that mimicked the marks on the bear's fur. Papers, pens, coffee cups, all slowly sliding into precise positions. The markings are some kind of template, Sarah realized, watching the phenomenon. They're teaching us a new way to organize information, a new way to think. She grabbed her phone and began photographing the patterns, her scientific mind racing to document everything. It's like the spirit fire isn't just marking individual animals, it's creating a whole new system of communication between species. The bear's breathing had steadied under the influence of the sedative, but her consciousness remained strong, continuing to share crucial information. Through her eyes, they saw other marked animals gathering in clearings throughout the forest, forming circles that somehow enhanced their ability to share thoughts and memories. They saw younger animals being taught by marked ones, learning to bridge the gap between animal instinct and conscious understanding. Dr. Swift worked quickly, cleaning and treating the burns with a combination of modern medicine and traditional remedies she'd learned from local indigenous healers. "These wounds," she said, her professional detachment slipping, "they're not just healing differently, they're transforming the surrounding tissue. It's like her entire cellular structure is being rewritten." Mac's body cam continued to record everything, though they all knew the footage would capture only the physical aspects of what was happening. The deeper truth, the sharing of consciousness, the transformation of understanding, would have to be conveyed through their testimony and the evidence of the changed behavior of marked animals in the weeks and months to come. The station's lights began to flicker, and the electronic devices in the room started behaving erratically. The bear's markings pulsed more strongly, and suddenly every computer screen, every phone display, every digital readout showed the same pattern, a complex symbol that matched the central marking on the bear's chest. Sarah's grandmother sent one final message before all the phones went dark. "It's beginning." The old stories say this is how it starts: the Great Awakening, the time when the boundaries between worlds start to dissolve. Through their shared connection, they felt the bear's satisfaction. Despite her grievous injuries, despite the loss of her cubs, she had accomplished something monumental. She had become one of the first bridges between the old world and whatever was coming next. Her sacrifice and their choice to help her had opened a door that could never fully close again. The spirit fire's light had faded from the sky, but its effects were still unfolding. Outside the station, they could hear the sounds of more animals approaching, not in fear or aggression, but drawn by the presence of something remarkable. Through the windows, they saw wolves, deer, and even a mountain lion emerging from the darkness, each bearing similar glowing marks, each coming to witness the moment when humanity finally began to understand the deeper consciousness that had always existed in the natural world. Dr. Swift's hands moved with practiced precision as she treated the bear's wounds, but her scientific mind was racing to comprehend what she was seeing. The burned tissue wasn't behaving like normal injuries. Instead of showing signs of degradation, the cells appeared to be reorganizing themselves into complex patterns that mimicked the glowing marks on the bear's fur. Through her surgical magnifying glasses, She could see something that defied all medical understanding. The damaged tissue was transforming, creating structures that seemed to bridge the gap between nervous system and something else entirely. "These aren't just burns anymore," she explained to the others, her voice tight with controlled excitement. "The tissue is developing what appears to be new types of neural networks, but they're unlike anything I've ever seen in any species. It's as if her entire nervous system is being rewired to accommodate new forms of consciousness." She looked up at Sarah, who had been documenting everything with meticulous scientific precision. "Those markings aren't just superficial, they're blueprints for biological transformation." The bear's mind touched theirs again, but this time the connection was even stronger, more structured. Instead of just sharing memories and emotions, she began conveying complex concepts about the nature of consciousness itself. Through her perspective, they understood that animals had always possessed deep awareness and intelligence, but had lacked the biological structures needed to bridge the communication gap with humans. The spirit fire, they realized, wasn't just marking animals. It was accelerating an evolution that would have naturally taken thousands of years. Lucy's medical monitors had begun picking up unusual readings. "Her brainwave patterns are synchronizing with ours," she reported, staring at the equipment in amazement. "But there's more. Look at this." She turned one of the screens so they could all see it. The display showed overlapping wave patterns. The bears, the humans, and a third pattern that seemed to encompass both while adding something entirely new. "It's like we're developing a shared neural network, a way of processing information that combines human analytical thinking with animal intuitive awareness." Miguel, who had been quietly observing the growing crowd of marked animals outside, noticed something extraordinary. The animals weren't just gathering. They were arranging themselves in specific patterns that match the markings on the mother bear's fur. "They're creating some kind of resonance pattern," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "Every time they move into a new formation, the markings on all of them glow more brightly." Sarah's scientific training warred with what she was witnessing, but years of working with her grandmother had taught her that ancient wisdom often contained profound truths dressed in metaphorical language. The old stories weren't just legends, she realized aloud. They were predictions, preparations for this moment. The spirit fire isn't just a supernatural force, it's a catalyst for the next step in coevolution between humans and animals. Thad felt the bear's consciousness brush against his mind again, but this time there was something different in the contact. She was showing him not just memories or emotions, but possibilities, futures that could unfold if this moment of connection was properly understood and nurtured. He saw humans and animals working together in ways that transcended the old boundaries of domestication or training. He saw marked animals teaching humans deeper ways of understanding the natural world, while humans helped animals adapt to an increasingly complex environment. Mac's police body cam had stopped recording normally, but the device was doing something unprecedented. Instead of storing visual data, it seemed to be capturing the patterns of consciousness themselves, translating the shared neural networks into a new form of information storage. "This isn't just changing them," he said, looking at the strange symbols flowing across his camera's display. "It's changing us, changing our technology, changing everything that comes into contact with it." Dr. Swift had finished treating the immediate injuries, but she knew this was just the beginning. "Her body temperature has stabilized," she reported, "but these changes, they're still accelerating. The marked tissue is spreading, creating new neural pathways. It's like watching millions of years of evolution happening in real time." She sat back on her heels, mind racing with the implications. "We're going to need a whole new field of medicine to understand this. The line between veterinary science and human medicine just got very, very blurry. Through their strengthening connection, the bear began sharing something urgent. A warning wrapped in hope. The Spirit Fire's marks were a gift, but they came with responsibility. The changed animals would need protection during their transformation, and the humans who could communicate with them would need to serve as bridges between the old world and the new. More importantly, they would need to help other humans understand and accept what was happening, to prevent fear from destroying this crucial moment of evolution. Suddenly, all the marked animals outside turned their heads in perfect unison, looking toward the north. Through their shared consciousness, the humans felt it too. More spirit fires were appearing across the continent, seeking out other animals, other humans who were ready to participate in this great transformation. The mother bear's sacrifice had been just the beginning, the first key turning in a lock that had kept two worlds separate for far too long. The station's electronic equipment continued its strange behavior, but now it seemed more purposeful. The patterns appearing on screens and displays were forming into something recognizable. A new kind of language that combined human symbols with the instinctive understanding of animals. Sarah realized that her phone was no longer just receiving texts from her grandmother. It was recording this new communication system, creating a bridge between traditional human knowledge and this emerging form of cross-species consciousness. Dr. Swift's careful examination of the bear's transformed tissue had revealed something even more extraordinary. Under her microscope, she could see that the new neural structures weren't just reorganizing. They were creating what appeared to be quantum connections, tiny bridges in space-time that somehow linked consciousness across species barriers. "This goes beyond anything in modern medicine," she explained, her voice trembling with excitement. "These structures appear to be creating quantum entanglement between neurons. It's as if the Spirit Fire has given these animals, and now us, the ability to share consciousness through quantum communication." The implications of this discovery were staggering. Lucy's medical monitors had begun picking up synchronized patterns that extended far beyond their immediate group. "The quantum entanglement is spreading," she reported, watching as new data flooded her screens. "We're picking up similar neural patterns from marked animals across the entire region, all connected through some kind of quantum network. It's like they're creating a shared consciousness that transcends physical distance." Sarah had been correlating the emerging patterns with her grandmother's ancient stories, and a deeper understanding was beginning to emerge. The indigenous peoples didn't just predict this, she realized. They experienced an earlier version of it. The stories about speaking with animals, about spirit walks and shared dreams, they weren't metaphors. They were describing early manifestations of this quantum consciousness before humanity took a different evolutionary path. Through their strengthening connection with the mother bear, they began to understand the true purpose of the Spirit Fire. It wasn't just creating isolated instances of human-animal communication. It was restoring an ancient network of consciousness that had once connected all living things. The burn patterns weren't just marks. They were quantum antennas, allowing marked beings to tap into this restored network. Miguel, still monitoring the growing assembly of marked animals outside, noticed something remarkable. The animals weren't just maintaining their geometric formations. They were teaching newly arrived creatures how to join the network. They watched in amazement as a young deer, unmarked but drawn to the gathering, was gradually surrounded by marked animals. As they observed, the quantum patterns began to appear on its fur, spreading not through fire, but through direct consciousness transfer. "They're reproducing the Spirit Fire's effects through pure consciousness," Dr. Swift breathed, watching through the window. "The marked animals are becoming living carriers of the transformation." She turned back to her microscope, examining the bear's changing tissue. The quantum structures in her cells, they're becoming self-replicating. Once enough beings are connected to the network, the spirit fire itself won't be needed anymore. The transformation will become self-sustaining. Thad felt the bear's consciousness merge more deeply with his own, and suddenly he understood something crucial. The loss of her cubs hadn't just been a tragedy, it had been a catalyst. Her grief, her desperate search for help, had created the perfect emotional resonance to bridge the gap between human and animal consciousness. The spirit fire had chosen her precisely because her loss would enable her to connect so profoundly with human emotion. Through this deepening connection, the bear shared a vision of the future that took their breath away. They saw cities where marked animals worked alongside humans as true partners, their quantum-linked consciousness allowing for perfect understanding and cooperation. They saw forests where human scientists learned directly from animal consciousness, accessing millennia of evolutionary wisdom. They saw a world where the artificial boundaries between human and animal intelligence had dissolved, replaced by a quantum network of shared consciousness that enriched both species. Mac's transformed body cam had begun broadcasting these visions directly to police headquarters, where stunned officers watched as their understanding of reality was transformed. Reports were coming in from across the country. Other police stations, wildlife centers, and research facilities were experiencing similar encounters. The quantum network was expanding exponentially, each new connection strengthening and stabilizing the whole. Dr. Swift's examination had revealed another crucial detail. The quantum structures, she explained, they're not just creating connections, they're improving brain function in both humans and animals. It's like the network itself is teaching our brains new ways to process information, new ways to think. She looked up from her microscope, eyes shining. We're not just sharing consciousness, we're evolving together in real time. Sarah's grandmother sent one final message before her phone transformed completely into a quantum communication device. The elders spoke of a time when the walls between worlds would fall, when the great separation would end. But they also warned that this moment would be fragile. The network needs protection while it grows, guides while it develops. You are its first guardians. The mother bear's consciousness touched them all again, sharing not just information but a profound sense of purpose. They understood that they had become part of something ancient and new at the same time. A restored connection that had once been lost, now reborn in a form that could survive in the modern world. Her sacrifice, her courage in seeking human help, had opened a door that would transform both human and animal consciousness forever. The transformation of the police station's technology had reached a critical point. Every electronic device had become part of the quantum network, creating what Dr. Swift described as a consciousness interface between digital and organic systems. The screens no longer displayed traditional data, but showed flowing patterns that somehow translated the shared thoughts and emotions of both humans and animals into a form they could all understand. Through these transformed devices, they could see the quantum network spreading across the continent like a dawn of new awareness. The technology isn't just adapting to the network, Lucy observed, watching as her medical equipment evolved before her eyes. It's becoming a bridge between different types of consciousness. Look at this. She pointed to what had once been a heart monitor but now displayed complex, multi-dimensional patterns. It's showing the emotional states of every connected being in a 10-mile radius, both human and animal. The quantum entanglement is creating a kind of universal translator for consciousness itself. The mother bear's presence in their minds had grown stronger, more structured. Through her, they began to understand that the quantum network wasn't just sharing thoughts and memories. It was creating a new form of collective intelligence that preserved individual consciousness while allowing unprecedented levels of cooperation and understanding. Each connected being, whether human or animal, contributed its unique perspective to the whole, while maintaining its distinct identity. Sarah's scientific training had given her the vocabulary to understand what they were witnessing. "This is beyond regular neural networks," she explained, watching as new quantum patterns emerged in the air around them, visible now to their enhanced perception. "We're seeing the emergence of a quantum neural network that operates outside normal space-time constraints. Every connected consciousness becomes both an individual node and part of a larger, collective intelligence." Through their shared connection, the bear revealed something that left them stunned. The spirit fire hadn't appeared by accident. It was a response to a critical moment in Earth's history. The ancient network of consciousness that once connected all living things had been dormant for millennia, waiting for the right conditions to re-emerge. The increasing environmental pressures of the modern world, combined with humanity's growing awareness of animal intelligence, had created the perfect conditions for its restoration. Dr. Swift's examination of the bear's transformed tissue continued to reveal new wonders. "The quantum structures aren't just creating communication pathways," she reported, her voice filled with amazement. "They're improving cellular repair mechanisms, enhancing immune responses, even optimizing energy use at the molecular level. It's as if the network is teaching our bodies how to function more efficiently at every scale." Miguel, who had been monitoring the growing assembly of marked animals outside, noticed something extraordinary. The animals weren't just maintaining their geometric formations. They had begun creating what appeared to be living Fibonacci spirals, each position precisely calculated to strengthen the quantum field. "They're building a physical manifestation of the network," he realized. "The geometric patterns are like quantum amplifiers, strengthening the connection across greater distances." The bear's consciousness touched theirs again, sharing urgent knowledge. The quantum network wasn't just about communication, it was about survival. In the face of increasing environmental challenges, the barrier between human and animal consciousness had become an evolutionary liability. The spirit fire was nature's response, a way of jump-starting the next phase of co-evolution between species. Through their enhanced perception, they could now see the quantum patterns flowing through everything. Plants, animals, even the Earth itself. The network wasn't limited to marked beings. They were just the initial nodes, the pioneers who would help others connect. Every living thing had the potential to join the network, to contribute its unique perspective to the growing collective consciousness. Mac's transformed body cam had become something entirely new. A quantum consciousness recorder that could capture and share not just images and sounds, but the full depth of experience and understanding flowing through the network. "This isn't just going to change law enforcement," he said, watching as the device evolved. "It's going to change everything. When people see this footage, when they feel what we're feeling, there's no going back." The mother bear's story had become a cornerstone of the network, her sacrifice and courage reverberating through the quantum field like a bell tone, calling others to awaken. Through her shared memories, they understood that her lost cubs weren't truly gone. Their consciousness had somehow been preserved in the quantum network. Зрение, их опыт и суть становятся частью коллективного знания, которое будет направлять этот новый этап эволюции. Sarah's grandmother's wisdom, passed down through generations, took on new meaning as they witnessed ancient prophecies becoming quantum reality. The stories hadn't just predicted this moment, they had helped prepare humanity for it, keeping alive the memory of a time when all consciousness was connected, when the boundaries between species were more fluid, and understanding flowed freely between all living things. Through their deepening connection with the network, They began to understand their role as its first guardians. They would need to help others understand and accept this transformation, to prevent fear and resistance from disrupting the delicate process of reconnection. The quantum network was both incredibly robust and surprisingly fragile. Like any newborn consciousness, it needed protection and guidance as it grew. As the quantum network continued to expand, Dr. Swift made a discovery that transformed their understanding of what was happening. Using her enhanced perception, she noticed that the bear's transformed cells weren't just creating new neural pathways. They were accessing genetic memories stored in junk DNA, portions of the genome that scientists had long dismissed as non-functional. "This isn't just evolution," she explained, her voice trembling with excitement. "It's re-evolution. The network is reactivating capabilities that both humans and animals once possessed, abilities that went dormant when our species took different evolutionary paths." Through their shared consciousness, the mother bear confirmed this insight, showing them glimpses of an ancient world where the boundaries between species were more permeable, where consciousness flowed freely between all living things. The spirit fire hadn't created something new. It had restored something that had been lost, an ability that lay dormant in the DNA of every living creature on Earth. Lucy's transformed medical equipment revealed another extraordinary development. The quantum structures weren't just spreading through nervous systems. They were beginning to appear in plant life as well. The trees outside the station had started developing luminous patterns in their bark, and their root systems were lighting up with quantum activity. "The mycorrhizal networks," she gasped, understanding dawning. "The fungi that connect tree roots, they're becoming quantum-enabled too. The network isn't just linking animals and humans. It's reconnecting the entire living world." Sarah's grandmother sent one final transmission before her phone completely transformed. The elders spoke of a time before the Great Forgetting, when humans could speak with trees, when animals shared their wisdom freely, when the world was one living mind with countless voices. That time is returning, but in a new way, adapted for the world we live in now. The mother bear's consciousness grew stronger as she recovered from her injuries, and through her they began to understand the true scope of what was happening. The spirit fire's markings weren't just creating communication networks, they were awakening a form of planetary consciousness that had been dormant for millennia. Every marked being became not just a node in the local network, but part of an emerging global awareness. Miguel, still observing the geometric patterns formed by the gathered animals, noticed something remarkable. The formations weren't random. They matched ancient petroglyphs found throughout the world. "Look at this," he said, pulling up images on his transformed phone. "These patterns appear in rock art from every continent, spanning thousands of years. Our ancestors weren't just drawing what they saw, they were recording instructions for rebuilding the network when the time was right." Through their enhanced perception, they could now see how the quantum field responded to emotions and intentions. When the gathered beings focused their attention together, the network visible to their new senses would pulse with increased energy, creating cascading patterns of consciousness that spread far beyond their immediate location. They were learning that consciousness itself could be directed and amplified, used to accelerate healing, enhance understanding, and strengthen the connections between all living things. Mac's transformed recording equipment had begun capturing something unprecedented, the actual process of consciousness evolution in real time. They could see how each new connection to the network created ripple effects, awakening dormant capabilities in connected beings and calling to those still unconnected. The footage showed consciousness itself as a tangible force, flowing between species and gradually dissolving the artificial boundaries that had separated the living world. The bear shared another crucial insight. The quantum network wasn't just about communication or shared consciousness, it was about resilience. In the face of mounting environmental challenges, the isolated consciousness of individual species had become a liability. The network provided a way for all living things to share information, adapt collectively, and respond to threats with the combined wisdom of the entire biosphere. Dr. Swift's ongoing examination revealed that the quantum structures were becoming more sophisticated with each passing moment. "The network is learning," she explained, watching new patterns emerge under her microscope. "Each connection teaches it something new. Each participant adds their unique perspective and capabilities. It's developing faster than any natural or artificial system we've ever encountered." Through their strengthened connection to the network, they began to understand why this transformation had begun in their small town, with this particular bear, at this specific moment. The combination of her profound loss, their willingness to help despite their fears, and the presence of individuals with the right mix of scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom had created perfect conditions for the network's reemergence. The quantum field around the station had grown strong enough that they could now perceive events happening across vast distances. They saw other spirit fires appearing around the world, other moments of connection between humans and animals, other nodes of awakening consciousness joining the growing network. Each new connection strengthened the whole. Each participant added their unique perspective to the emerging planetary awareness. Sarah's scientific training helped her understand the mathematical beauty of what they were witnessing. "The network isn't just growing randomly," she explained, watching the patterns flow through their enhanced perception. "It's following perfect mathematical progressions, Fibonacci sequences, golden ratios, fractal patterns. It's organizing itself according to the same principles that govern all natural growth and development." The transformed technology throughout the station had begun to reveal even deeper layers of understanding. The quantum network wasn't just connecting consciousness. It was fundamentally altering how information itself was processed and shared across all living systems. Dr. Swift's enhanced medical equipment showed that the bear's neural pathways had evolved beyond conventional synaptic connections, creating what she termed quantum synapses that could transmit information instantaneously across any distance. "These quantum synapses," she explained, watching new patterns emerge under her microscope, "they're not just connecting different parts of her brain or even different individuals in the network. They're creating connections that transcend normal space-time limitations. When she shares a memory or experience, it's not just a communication. It's a complete transfer of lived experience, including all the emotional and sensory context that went with it." Through their deepening connection to the network, they began to understand that consciousness itself was far more complex and interconnected than human science had imagined. The mother bear's grief over her lost cubs had created what Sarah called a consciousness resonance, a powerful emotional frequency that had helped catalyze the reawakening of the dormant quantum network. Lucy's medical monitoring systems, now fully integrated with the quantum field, revealed something astonishing about the bear's injuries. "The burned tissue isn't just healing," she reported, watching the data flow across her transformed screens. "It's reconstructing itself using quantum entanglement to access what you might call the memory of healthy tissue. It's like the quantum network can access an ideal template of how her body should be and is using that to guide the healing process." The gathering of marked animals outside had grown larger, and their geometric formations had become more complex. Miguel, who had been studying their patterns, made a breakthrough in understanding their purpose. "They're not just strengthening the network," he explained, excitement clear in his voice. "They're creating what you might call consciousness amplifiers, living geometric arrangements that can boost and direct the quantum field. Each formation serves a different purpose. Some heal, some teach, some protect. Through their shared connection, the mother bear revealed another layer of understanding about the spirit fire's purpose. It wasn't just restoring an ancient network, it was preparing Earth's biosphere for a crucial evolutionary leap. The increasing environmental pressures of the modern world had created a moment of crisis that required a new level of cooperation between all living things. Mac's transformed recording equipment had begun capturing something that defied conventional understanding: the actual structure of consciousness itself. The footage showed how thoughts, emotions, and memories moved through the quantum network, how different species processed information in unique but complementary ways, and how the collective intelligence of the network was greater than the sum of its parts. Sarah's grandmother's wisdom, now fully integrated into their quantum-enhanced understanding, took on new significance. The ancient stories hadn't just preserved knowledge of the old network, they had encoded instructions for how to guide and nurture its reemergence. Through the quantum field, they could now access the accumulated wisdom of countless generations, both human and animal, seeing how different cultures and species had maintained their connections to this deeper level of reality. Dr. Swift's continued examination of the quantum structures revealed another extraordinary development. The network isn't just creating new neural pathways, she explained, her voice filled with wonder. It's developing what I can only describe as quantum organs, new biological structures specifically designed to process and transmit consciousness across the network. These structures appear to be drawing on genetic information that's been dormant in our DNA for millions of years. The bear's consciousness touched theirs again, sharing a vision of the future that took their breath away. They saw a world where the artificial boundaries between species had dissolved, where humans and animals worked together as equal partners in planetary stewardship. They saw forests managed through shared consciousness, cities designed to enhance rather than suppress the natural world, and new forms of technology that arose from the perfect integration of human innovation and natural wisdom. Through their enhanced perception, they could now see how the quantum network was affecting the very fabric of reality around them. The air itself seemed to shimmer with consciousness, every molecule participating in the vast dance of information and awareness. The boundaries between physical and mental, between individual and collective, had become fluid, creating new possibilities for understanding and cooperation. The spirit fire's marks on the bear's fur had evolved beyond simple patterns. They had become living symbols that could transmit complex information directly to consciousness. Each mark told a story, carried a teaching, or preserved a crucial piece of wisdom about the network's purpose and potential. Through these marks, the bear had become not just a participant in the network, but a living library of its emerging knowledge. The quantum network's expansion had reached a critical threshold, and Dr. Swift's enhanced instruments began detecting something unprecedented. The collective consciousness wasn't just connecting existing minds, it was giving rise to entirely new forms of awareness. In the spaces between connected beings, patterns of quantum activity were spontaneously emerging, creating what she termed consciousness ecosystems, self-organizing fields of shared awareness that could process and respond to information independently of individual participants. It's like watching the birth of a new form of intelligence, she explained, her scientific training struggling to find words for what she was witnessing. Imagine if you could see thoughts taking physical form, becoming living entities in their own right. These consciousness ecosystems are like neural networks made of pure quantum information, evolving and learning in ways we've never seen before. Through their deepening connection with the mother bear, they began to understand that their role in this transformation went far beyond simple observation. Each of them had been chosen, not by chance but by a deep resonance between their individual capabilities and the network's needs. Thad's capacity for empathy, Dr. Swift's scientific insight, Sarah's bridge between traditional and modern knowledge, all were crucial components in guiding this evolutionary leap. Lucy's transformed medical equipment had begun mapping what she called the consciousness genome, the underlying patterns that governed how awareness itself was structured and transmitted through the quantum network. Every species contributes its own unique pattern, she explained, watching the data flow across her screens. Humans add analytical thinking and technological innovation. Bears bring deep ecological wisdom and emotional intelligence. Birds contribute understanding of global patterns and migration. When these patterns combine in the network, they create something entirely new, a kind of universal consciousness that can think in ways no single species ever could. The geometric formations of marked animals outside had evolved into what Miguel recognized as living mandalas, complex, dynamic patterns that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. Each formation served a specific purpose in the network's development. Some processed and distributed information, others facilitated healing and transformation, while still others seemed to be opening doorways to deeper levels of quantum reality. Through their enhanced perception, they could now see that the Spirit Fire's marks weren't just on the surface. They extended through multiple dimensions of reality. Dr. Swift's quantum-enhanced microscope revealed that each mark was actually a complex four-dimensional structure, encoding information not just in its physical pattern but in its quantum state and its relationship to time itself. These marks are like consciousness fractals, Sarah explained, drawing on both her scientific training and her grandmother's wisdom. Each one contains the pattern for the entire network, but also adds its own unique variation. When a new being receives the marks, they're not just joining the network, they're becoming a living archive of all the knowledge and experience it contains, while adding their own perspective to the whole. The mother bear's consciousness merged more deeply with theirs, sharing understanding that transcended ordinary language. They saw how the quantum network was creating what could only be described as a consciousness technology, a way of processing and sharing information that combined the best aspects of both natural and artificial intelligence. This new form of intelligence could think with the precision of a computer, but feel with the depth of a living being, could analyze with scientific rigor, but understand with intuitive wisdom. Mac's transformed recording equipment had evolved beyond simply documenting the transformation. It had become part of it. The quantum-enhanced devices were now capable of not just recording, but participating in the flow of consciousness, creating what he called memory spheres, self-contained bubbles of quantum information that could preserve and transmit complete experiences, including all sensory and emotional content. Through these memory spheres, they began to understand the true significance of what they were witnessing. The quantum network wasn't just an evolutionary advancement. It was the universe itself developing self-awareness through its living components. Each connected being became a kind of sensory organ for universal consciousness, contributing its unique perspective to an ever-growing understanding of reality. Dr. Swift's ongoing examination of the quantum structures revealed that they were beginning to affect the fundamental forces of nature themselves. The consciousness network isn't just biological anymore, she reported, watching new patterns emerge in her instruments. It's starting to influence gravity, electromagnetic fields, even the strong and weak nuclear forces. It's as if consciousness itself is becoming a fundamental force of nature, capable of directing and organizing matter and energy at the most basic level. The bear's presence in their minds had grown so profound that they could now access not just her memories and emotions, but the accumulated wisdom of her entire species, millions of years of evolution and experience, preserved in what Sarah called the quantum memory of her DNA. Through this connection, they understood that bears had always been more than just powerful predators. They were guardian spirits of the wilderness, keeping alive the dream of reconnection until humanity was ready to understand. The quantum network's evolution had begun to reveal even deeper mysteries. Through their enhanced perception, they witnessed how individual consciousness could now flow seamlessly between different states of being. Dr. Swift's instruments detected what she called consciousness harmonics, vibrations in the quantum field that allowed beings to share not just thoughts and memories, but entire states of existence. What we're seeing goes beyond simple communication or even shared awareness, she explained, watching as new patterns emerged in her quantum-enhanced displays. When a bear connects with a human through the network, they don't just share information. They can actually experience each other's way of being. A human can know what it feels like to sense the world through a bear's awareness, to feel the earth through their paws, to understand territory and season the way they do. And the bears can comprehend human abstract thinking, our capacity for symbolic reasoning, our ability to project consciousness into possible futures. Lucy's medical monitoring systems had evolved to track these consciousness exchanges, revealing something extraordinary about how they affected both participants. Each exchange leaves a permanent imprint, she reported, studying the flowing data. It's like both beings retain an echo of each other's consciousness, expanding their capacity for understanding in ways that persist even when they're not actively connected. The more exchanges that occur, the more each participant's consciousness expands, creating what you might call a compound awareness that combines multiple ways of experiencing reality. The mother bear's presence in their minds had grown so profound that they could now access what Sarah termed the Ursine Archive, the collected wisdom of bears throughout history, preserved in the quantum memory of their species. Through this vast repository of experience, they understood how bears had served as guardians of wilderness consciousness, maintaining ancient ways of knowing that humans had forgotten. Each bear was born with this wisdom encoded in their quantum consciousness, passed down through generations, not just through genetics but through the deeper patterns of awareness itself. Miguel's observation of the geometric formations outside had revealed another layer of understanding. The marked animals weren't just arranging themselves in patterns. They were creating what he called consciousness lattices, living networks that could process and transform awareness itself. Each formation is like a living computer, he explained. But instead of processing digital information, it processes states of consciousness. They can take raw awareness and refine it, transform it, evolve it into higher forms of understanding. Through their strengthened connection to the network, they began to perceive what Dr. Swift called consciousness currents, flows of awareness that moved through the quantum field like rivers of pure understanding. These currents carried not just information but transformative potential, changing everything they touched. When a consciousness current flowed through a being, it could awaken dormant capabilities, heal psychological wounds, or catalyze evolutionary leaps in awareness. Max transformed recording equipment had begun capturing these consciousness currents, creating what he termed quantum memories, records that contained not just events but entire fields of possibility. These recordings don't just show what happened, he explained, watching the shifting patterns in his devices. They show what could have happened, what might still happen, and how different choices affect the flow of consciousness through reality. It's like having a map of potential futures, written in the language of pure awareness. The spirit fire's marks on the bear's fur had evolved into what Sarah recognized as quantum hieroglyphs, living symbols that could transmit entire realms of understanding through their very structure. Each mark was like a door that opened into vast libraries of wisdom, preserved not in words or images but in pure states of consciousness that could be experienced directly by any connected being. Through their deepened connection, they understood that the mother bear's loss of her cubs had served a profound purpose in the universe's evolution. Her grief had created what Dr. Swift called a consciousness singularity, a point of such intense emotional resonance that it had pierced the veil between ordinary and quantum reality, allowing the ancient network to reawaken in a form suited to the modern world. The quantum field around the station had grown so strong that they could now perceive what Lucy termed consciousness dimensions, layers of reality that existed alongside physical space-time, but operated according to the laws of pure awareness. In these dimensions, thoughts took form, emotions became landscapes, and understanding flowed like light between conscious beings. The bear's consciousness merged with theirs once more, sharing a vision of such profound significance that it took their breath away. They saw how the quantum network was not just connecting existing consciousness but giving birth to entirely new forms of awareness. Each connection, each sharing of perspective, each flow of understanding between species was contributing to the emergence of what could only be described as a planetary mind, a level of consciousness that could think and feel with the combined wisdom of all Earth's living beings. Through this expanded awareness, they understood their own role in this cosmic evolution with crystal clarity. The seemingly random events that had brought them together, a wounded bear, a snowy night, their unique combinations of knowledge and capability, had been orchestrated by the deeper patterns of consciousness itself, creating perfect conditions for the next step in universal awareness to emerge. As dawn approached, the quantum network had transformed their small police station into what Dr. Swift called a consciousness nexus, a point where multiple layers of awareness converged and flowed together. The mother bear, her injuries now healed by the quantum field's regenerative power, stood slowly. Her fur gleamed with the spirit fire's marks, each one now a living testament to the bridge she had helped build between worlds. Through their shared connection, they understood that this night had changed not just their lives, but the course of evolution itself. The barrier between human and animal consciousness, maintained for millennia, had finally dissolved. In its place, a new way of being had emerged, one that combined human innovation with animal wisdom, technological advancement with natural understanding. Dr. Swift's final readings confirmed what they all sensed. The quantum network had become self-sustaining. The spirit fire's work was complete, its testing and marking no longer needed. The transformed consciousness it had awakened would continue to spread naturally now, passed from mind to mind, species to species, through the very fabric of life itself. Sarah's grandmother's prophecies had been fulfilled, but in a way none of them had expected. The old stories hadn't just predicted this moment, they had helped shape it, keeping alive the memory of what was possible until humanity was ready to remember. The ancient wisdom and modern science had finally merged, creating something greater than either could have achieved alone. The mother bear turned to them one last time, her consciousness touching theirs with a depth of gratitude that transcended ordinary understanding. Through their connection, they felt the presence of her lost cubs, their essence preserved in the quantum field, their sacrifice part of the greater pattern that had led to this transformation. Their loss had created the emotional resonance needed to break through the barriers between species, their mother's grief becoming the key that unlocked a new stage of planetary evolution. As the sun rose over Pine Haven, the gathered animals began to disperse, each carrying within them the seeds of the new consciousness. But they weren't really leaving. Through the quantum network, all beings remained connected, their awareness flowing together in an eternal dance of understanding and growth. The boundary between separation and unity had dissolved, revealing a deeper truth. Consciousness itself was the fundamental reality, and all beings were its expressions. Mac's quantum-enhanced recordings would help others understand what had happened here, but the real evidence would be in the changed relationships between species that would unfold in the years to come. The story of a wounded bear seeking help on a snowy night would become legend, passed down through both human and animal consciousness as the moment when the Great Separation ended and a new chapter in Earth's story began. Thad looked at his transformed station, now a living monument to the bridge between worlds, and understood that their real work was just beginning. As the first witnesses to this evolutionary leap, they had become its guardians and teachers, responsible for helping others navigate the awakening of universal consciousness. The mother bear stepped out into the morning light, her fur shimmering with quantum knowledge, her presence a testament to the power of trust and compassion to transform reality itself. Through the network, they would always remain connected to her, their consciousness forever enriched by the wisdom she had shared. She had come to them as a wounded creature seeking shelter, but she had become something far more, a living bridge between what was and what could be, between the world of separation and the universe of unified awareness that now beckoned to all beings. As they watched her disappear into the awakening forest, they understood that every ending was also a beginning. The story of the spirit fire and the wounded bear would be told and retold, growing like ripples in the quantum field of consciousness, calling to all beings to remember their connection, to awaken to the greater awareness that had always existed within them. The long night of separation was over. The dawn of unified consciousness had begun. Thad looked at the faces around him. Mac, with his decades of experience and unshakable moral compass, Yang with her medical expertise and steady hands, Martinez, who had once risked his life to save a family of elk from a flash flood, and Cooper, whose understanding of these creatures went bone deep. Then he looked at the bear, this magnificent mother who had lost everything but still found the courage to seek help from those she'd been taught to fear. As they watched her disappear into the awakening forest, they understood that every ending was also a beginning. The story of the spirit fire and the wounded bear would be told and retold, growing like ripples in the quantum field of consciousness, calling to all beings to remember their connection, to awaken to the greater awareness that had always existed within them. The long night of separation was over. The dawn of unified consciousness had begun. Thad looked at the faces around him. Mac, with his decades of experience and unshakable moral compass. Yang, with her medical expertise and steady hands. Martinez, who had once risked his life to save a family of elk from a flash flood. And Cooper, whose understanding of these creatures went bone deep. Then he looked at the bear, this magnificent mother who had lost everything but still found the courage to seek help from those she'd been taught to fear. Martinez, get that heater set up by the front entrance. Yang, prep your med kit for large animal emergency care. Cooper, you're our bear expert. You call the shots once we get her inside. Mac ... He turned to his old friend. You're the senior officer here. If you want to stop this, now's the time. Mac looked at the bear, then at the teams of first responders who had, without hesitation, shown up in the middle of a snowstorm to save a creature they'd been trained to see as a threat. The orange glow in the sky had grown brighter, and somewhere in the distance they could hear the wail of fire sirens. Time was running out. Do it, Mac said, his voice firm. But we do this right, we do this smart. He turned to the team, years of tactical training taking over. Martinez, get that heater going and create a warm zone. Yang, I want a full set of emergency supplies ready. Pressure bandages, thermal blankets, the works. Cooper, what's our best approach for getting her inside without spooking her? Sarah was already moving, her mind racing through everything she'd learned at her grandmother's side. We need to minimize her stress. Bears can't sweat. They rely on panting to cool down. Between the burns and the cold, her body temperature is probably dangerously unstable. She pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. I'm sending a quick text to Gran. She might have some insights we can use. The bear's breathing had become more ragged, each exhale creating a smaller patch of fog on the window. The frozen blood in her fur had begun to crack and flake, revealing deeper wounds underneath. But it was the way she clutched that small scrap of fur to her chest that broke their hearts, a mother's last connection to her lost child. Thad's phone buzzed again. Marina's message made his blood run cold. Dad, the fire's doing something impossible. It's like it's hunting. The Forest Service rangers say they've never seen anything like it. It's following animal trails, tracking escape routes. Some people are saying it's not a natural fire at all. As if in response to the message, a massive boom echoed across the landscape, followed by the sound of splintering trees. The northern sky had turned an apocalyptic shade of orange-red, and now they could see it. Tongues of flame that seemed to move with purpose, snaking through the snow-covered forest in ways that defied all natural laws. The bear's head lifted at the sound, and the keen she let out this time was different, not just grief but warning. Her eyes fixed on something in the distance, and they all turned to look. Through the swirling snow, they could see other shapes moving in the darkness. Wildlife fleeing the advancing inferno. A herd of elk charged past the station, followed by a group of deer. Even a wolf pack loped by, too terrified of the unnatural fire to pay attention to potential prey. She's trying to warn us, Sarah whispered, her voice filled with awe. Even now, even after everything she's lost, she's trying to protect others. She straightened up, decision made. We need to create a calm environment. Bears have an incredible sense of smell. Martinez, get some honey from the break room. It's a familiar, non-threatening scent. Yang, prep a mild sedative dose, about a quarter of what you'd normally use for a bear this size. We don't want to knock her out completely, just take the edge off the pain. Thad's radio crackled again. Rosalie's voice came through, tight with concern. Thad, doctor. Swift's stuck on the North Road. The fire's cut off direct access to town. She's trying to find another route, but the static increased, almost drowning out her words. Whatever you're planning, you're on your own for now. Fire Service says this blaze is like nothing they've ever encountered. It's not just moving against the wind, it's circling back, cutting off escape routes. They're calling in specialists from the federal level. Some people are saying... She hesitated,